everyone. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Another Day, Another Made-for-TV Drama. My name is Jennifer Rainier Woods, and today I will be discussing the 1990 TV movie Always Remember I Love You, starring Stephen Dorff, Patty Duke, and Joan Van Ark, among others. But before I get into my review of the movie, just some quick facts about me. I am an admin on the fan pages Lifetime Movie Club and Lifetime Movie Channel on Facebook. These are not official pages. They are fan pages where you can discuss your favorite movies with others who enjoy Lifetime productions as well as classic TV movies as much as you do. I have recently released a book called Deadly Guide, The Search for the Killer Made-for-TV Thriller, which is a great resource for you if you especially enjoy those TV movies from the early 90s. If you like this episode and want to continue hearing more from me, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. I release one episode a week and sometimes additional content for you. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in my comment section. So let's begin. Throughout the 90s, a common plotline in these made-for-TV movies was the missing child who comes home. Sadly, in real life, most stranger abductions don't have a happy ending. Either the child is found dead or they're not found at all. Once again, I'm referring to non-family abductions and cases where the child didn't just run away from home. However, there have been many movies over the years where the child is returned safely because that's what the audience wants to see, right? Reunification of parent and child. Sometimes it's a happy reunion. Other times, it's bittersweet. And it can even be downright heartbreaking, such as in the 1995 TV movie The Face on the Milk Carton, which starred Kelly Martin and was based on the young adult book by Caroline B. Cooney. For more on that movie, check out my very first episode. Always Remember I Love You joins the list of movies about the child who survives a stranger abduction, and it was one of the first ones that came out in the early 90s. Some other examples of movies with this plotline are The Kissing Place, starring Meredith Baxter as a woman who abducts a young boy and raises him as her own. There Was a Little Boy is another one, starring Sybil Shepherd this time, as a mother of a missing child who later comes across a teen whom she is convinced is her long-lost son. The Stranger Within stars Rick Schroder and Kate Jackson and is about a young man who comes to a woman's door one night and claims to be her missing boy. However, there is some question about his true identity throughout the movie. I don't want to spoil the ending for you, though. Deception, A Mother's Secret is about a man who loses his wife in a car crash and then finds out the stepson he helped raise couldn't possibly have been hers because she was incapable of having children and was unlikely to have adopted one. It stars Steven Weber as the stepfather in search of his stepson's true identity. And of course, The Face on the Milk Carton, about a teen girl who sees a photo on the back of the milk carton and becomes convinced that she is the little girl pictured. There was also the feature film The Deep End of the Ocean, starring Michelle Pfeiffer, which was based on a novel by Jacqueline Mitchard. It's about a woman who meets a neighbor boy and becomes convinced he is her son who was abducted from her class reunion years earlier. And there was a French film called Olivier, which was about a 15-year-old who claims to be a missing boy who disappeared while riding his bike a few years earlier. He ends up having a relationship with the girl he claims is his older sister. But once again, like in The Stranger Within, there is a question about his true identity. There were notably a few cases where missing children have returned as teens or adults in real life. Examples are Steven Stainer, which was turned into a TV miniseries called I Know My First Name is Steven in 1989. There was the case of Sean Hornbeck, which was strikingly like the Steven Stainer case, as two boys returned together, one of whom had been recently abducted, and the other who had been missing for years. There were the cases of J.C. Lee Dugard, Elizabeth Smart, Elizabeth Fritzl, The Women in Cleveland, etc., etc. It's not common, but it has happened a few times in real life, and many of the famous cases hit the news in the past 20 years or so after the 90s. Getting back to today's movie, though, Always Remember I Love You is about a teen boy who finds out he was adopted, and before he even has time to process that, he learns that he wasn't actually officially put up for adoption, but rather was just taken from his real family. The movie opens with the teenager Robert's 16th birthday party. What he wants more than anything is a new car, but what his parents actually end up getting him is a timeless classic, pun intended, because what I'm referring to here is a wristwatch. Little did they know that in a little more than a decade, the watch would be rendered useless thanks to the invention of the cell phone. Anyway, the boy is a good sport about it, even though he must be at least a little disappointed. We also learn in the opening that the boy wishes he could spend more time with his father, who is busy with work and such. You know the routine. It's the same old story again and again in these 90s movies. We learn that Robert has been having disturbing dreams of a toddler or infant being pushed in a baby swing, and he doesn't know what they mean, but they are apparently very upsetting to him. Not long after, a man named Paul is arrested, and this gets the teenager Robert's parents all worked up. The movie is a bit cryptic at first about what is going on here, but we learn that Robert was adopted, and Paul had something to do with that adoption. Robert finds this out at the same time we do when he overhears his parents' heated conversation about it. He is devastated and storms off, brooding over the next few minutes of the movie as he comes to terms with this new reality. This turns out to not be the big revelation after all, though. Soon after, the parents learn that the baby they were given by Paul was not placed up for adoption by his mother. In fact, he was stolen from his real family. Paul, of course, never told them this because it wouldn't have been advantageous of him to do so if he was actually trying to get money from honest people. But needless to say, Robert's adoptive mother and father are horrified. The father takes some solace in the fact that maybe there isn't any evidence left for the police to find, but the mother is more concerned about what is moral and right. The parents reveal to Robert the fact that they only just discovered he was a stolen child. Robert is so upset that he goes off to another room and smashes a family photo. And then he storms Paul's office, demanding to know his true identity. The man is sprawled in his chair, looking like a drunk John Lovitz. Paul pays no attention as Robert rummages through his file cabinet, looking for info on his birth parents. He finds out he was taken from a city in Ohio, and the date that it all happened, and he hops a bus to do some further investigating based on this scrap of information. The predictable sad oboe music plays as he arrives in town. In Ohio, after a quick stop for a cheeseburger and milk, by the way, I can't think of any kid who would order a glass of milk with his cheeseburger past maybe the early 90s, Robert plops himself down in front of a microfiche machine. Remember those microfiche machines that were big in the movies back in the day? And locates an article about a missing boy with the last name of Monroe. He seeks out the Monroes and watches them from a distance. The Monroes consist of a mother, a father, a teen boy who plays basketball, and a little blonde girl who will sometimes prance around in a feather boa. Seems like a typical happy family, right? The mother is played by Patty Duke, and an interesting side note is that Patty Duke also played a mother with the last name of Monroe in the classic TV movie A Killer Among Friends, which was based on the murder of teenager Missy Avila in the 80s. Anyway, getting back on topic. Robert's real father works at a garage called Earl's. We can tell that by the vehicle he drives. Robert hops on his bike and follows the mother and father on their morning commute one day and watches as the mother is dropped off in front of her workplace. By the way, I only just realized at this point that Robert had a bike, which made me wonder where it came from because he rode to Ohio on a bus. I had to rewind the video on YouTube in order to discover that he'd been riding the bike for a while, and I simply hadn't noticed. But I did also find the scene where he makes a stop at a store to buy a tent and a bike. Very practical things to have when your intent is to hunt down your missing family in a faraway city after finding out you were abducted at the age of 1 or 2. So skipping ahead to the mother being dropped off at work. She gives Robert a brief nod as she passes him on the street. A cordial thing to do and the kind of thing adults did when passing other people's children in movies and real life back in the day. Once she reaches the door of her business place, though, she seems to give him a second thought and turns her head to glance back his way, a strange, wistful look on her face. Later, while looking through a photo album, she has memories of her son being abducted from her front yard, and this is where we find out more about how the abduction actually occurred. Because Robert's dreams were incredibly fragmented, as dreams usually are, especially if they're memories from the age of 2. My understanding is that it's not common for people to even have any memories from before the age of 3, so already these dreams are a little bit suspect. But hey, it's a TV movie, and TV movies aren't bound to the laws of reality. I have to say this. Poor Patty Duke. They absolutely put this woman through the ringer in these 90s movies. She has an abducted son in this one, a murdered daughter in A Killer Among Friends in 1992, and there were 2 other movies in the 90s where she had a son who was murdered by romantic partners. And she's also played a woman who lived in a haunted house. She just could never get a break. Anyway, Robert interacts with Mrs. Monroe at the store where she works. He stops in to buy some eyeglass frames. She bumps into him again shortly after at the local diner. The waitress there tells Mrs. Monroe in confidence that she thinks the teen boy is a runaway because he's unfamiliar to her, but she's seen him a lot lately. Mrs. Monroe is skeptical, but starts to look at him in a new light. Soon after, Robert is hanging out by the fenced-in schoolyard where some teenagers are playing basketball. He is noticed and invited to join in the game, which he does. One of the boys is his long-lost brother, only the brother doesn't realize this, of course. Only Robert knows. Robert befriends his brother and ingratiates himself into the boy's family under the guise of being the new friend of the teen son and a mysterious runaway, whom the father is suspicious of, but the mother has a softness for. And while all of this is going on in Ohio, Robert's adoptive parents are getting reasonably worried about their runaway son. Lots of sad oboe music abounds in this film. Or maybe it's a flute. Who knows? Who cares? You probably can still hear it playing in your head either way. I really enjoyed this movie. I always enjoy watching Patty Duke on screen. Stephen Dorff hasn't been in as many of the TV movies that I've watched, so it was kind of nice to see him instead of regulars like Rick Schroder and Neil Patrick Harris. I did think that Stephen Dorff looked a little like Corinne Nemec in this, but it might just have been the fact that he reminded me of the character Nemec played in I Know My First Name is Steven. Interesting side note, Stephen Dorff played the friend of Steven Stayner in I Know My First Name is Steven during a scene where Steven was living as Dennis. It was also interesting to see Richard Masur play the bio-father of a kidnapped teen who returns home, just like he did in The Face on the Milk Carton. In both cases, he played the bio-father of a little kid who's abducted and then returns as a teen. But Always Remember I Love You did something different with the same basic plot line, which I won't go into more detail about in order to avoid spoilers. I have to say I was a little bit disappointed with the ending of Always Remember I Love You because I wanted more of a payoff than I got, but there was a little bit of a payoff at the end at least. This is a movie that's really good at delivering most of what it promises to deliver. The ending wasn't as big of a moment as I hoped it would be, but it was still pretty decent-sized moment. The actors all did a great job. Just a really heartwarming film that keeps you, wondering. I was going to say wondering what's going to happen next. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but you're waiting for this big moment at the end that only somewhat comes. I would give the movie a 4 out of 5 stars. Overall, I would recommend it. It's on YouTube for free. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed my episode, and until next time, take care.